So it's a brand new year, 2018. Happy New Year, and President Trump coming back from Mar-a-Lago. And you might think playing all that golf and being in the sunshine, and yes, he worked too, that's what presidents do, might maybe have mellowed just a little bit toward the media. He did give an interview to the New York Times last week, but no, second day of the year, they're at it again. Now, what happened is that the new publisher of the New York Times, A.G. Sulzberger, you may recognize the last name because his father, Arthur Sulzberger Jr., was the publisher until a few weeks ago, and his father was another Sulzberger. Arthur Oak Sulzberger was the publisher as well. But he said he did one of these full-page letters to readers about all the wonderful journalistic principles the newspaper will uphold, and there was a part where A.G. Sulzberger, who has worked as a reporter at the paper, said that trust in media is declining. And the reason, says Sulzberger, is misinformation, clickbait, rumor, propaganda spread by technology, meaning social media platforms, and politicians who are inflaming suspicion of the press. And of course, he was talking about the President of the United States. Well, it didn't take that President of the United States very long to fire back on Twitter, saying the Times should get impartial journalists of a much higher standard, lose all of your phony and non-existent sources. Trump believes a lot of these sources are made up. I don't. And treat the President of the United States fairly, all caps, so that next time I and the people win, you won't have to write an apology to your readers for a job poorly done. Well, actually, the Times didn't apologize after the 2016 election, but allowed for the possibility that perhaps it had underestimated the strength of Donald Trump. Yeah, because you had that meter that said, you know, Hillary Clinton, 98% chance of winning. And this is interesting because not only is it just a little bit of a jousting to usher in the new year, but the president did give an interview to what he likes to call the failing New York Times. Not only is it not failing, but digital subscriptions are soaring in part because of his coverage of the Trump presidency. And he gave it to Michael Schmidt, who is an investigative reporter who's broken a lot of these sort of Russia probe and FBI stories. And he told Schmidt that he felt that Schmidt and other reporters had treated him fairly. So what's going on? Is this the same old love-hate relationship? Well, in that interview, we talked about this on the show last Sunday, the president said that when 2020 comes around, the media, maybe 6 months before, are going to act like they love him. They love him because they need him. They have to let me win, the president said, because I've been so good for the news business. And part of that is true. President Trump has been a goldmine for the very industry that has, I wouldn't just say aggressively covered him, but in many instances has been overwhelmingly negative toward him, has attacked him, particularly on the commentary side, has published some stories, he would call them fake news, that turned out not to be true, that had to be retracted. But despite all that, he says, I make you money, and it's true. Fox News is the #1 cable network, period, this year, second straight year. But CNN, MSNBC, which are not exactly friendly to Trump, have also had record-breaking years. New York Times has done very well. Just about every website. I mean, you know, everybody's talking about politics. People are engaged. They're on Twitter. They're on Facebook. And this president makes news all the time, not just on Twitter, but just in the way he conducts the presidency. It's like a fire hose of news stories and controversy. But I don't quite make the leap to say, well, one, that the sources are made up. The sources could be wrong. Sources often are wrong, particularly unnamed sources who don't have to be held accountable by name for what they provide. But also, journalists have a lot invested, and particularly, and this is true among some conservative publications that never liked this president, as well as the liberal precincts of the media. They have a lot invested in attacking Donald Trump because it appeals to readers and viewers and online people who go click, 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 who don't like the president. So he's made them lots of money. So in a way, they're in this relationship where they do get wealthier on the basis of the controversies constantly surrounding the Trump presidency. He has them as a foil, enemy of the American people, he famously called the press, and as a way to get his message out, even when the press doesn't like the message. But it doesn't necessarily mean that the journalists, who I'm sure they like having their companies make money, are going to go easy on him in 2020. I'm not so sure that's the case. That's how businessman Trump looks at it. It's not necessarily how working journalists look at it. As for the New York Times, it's the hometown paper. He keeps giving interviews to the paper, then he turns around and attacks the paper. That's just sort of the state of play as we kick off 2018.